So we got 2 more topic areas. We got 10 minutes left, so can make this one brief, and then we'll get to the secret sauce. I don't know what they're going to say, so this will be interesting. So the next one is managing expectations. So I talked with Karen about her project. It's a little bit unique because we worked on the ARA project. We got to build a lot of this back-end software for that. It was 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. I think we had, when we listed all of the ailments that occurred at the end of the project, it was quite extensive. H1N1, when that virus was out, we had one of those. We had a bunch of different things, but that's from working too hard. But the challenge with that project was kind of similar to what Karen's project went through, is you had a very tight deadline. You didn't have all the regulations in place before you started, nor did you have them when you finished. They kept changing throughout every conversation I had with the White House on that project. But so Karen actually talked to me a little bit about this thing called the Gartner hype model. And what I'd like to do is kind of have her talk a little bit about that. And the details are here, Karen, so if you want to.
Oh, no, yeah.
I'd like to have her talk a little bit.
Yeah, given the time. So, I think I was just driving an analogy to, how many of you are familiar with the Gartner hype cycles? Okay, only a couple of you, so I'll describe it. But basically, if you can imagine somebody climbing up a huge steep hill, and then they get to the top, and then they slide down into a valley, and then back up another little slope, and maybe it levels off. That's what the Gartner hype cycle looks like. And so, a project, especially these big projects, I feel is always like that. You're climbing up to the top of that hill when you finally launch, whether it's 1 release or 5 releases or whatever. And then everybody gets to the top, and there's cake and balloons and a nice celebration. And then you start sliding down that other side into what they call the Valley of Despair. Because inevitably, and I've seen it every single time, even with the most successful projects, there's always that, what they call at the top of the hill, the peak of inflated expectations. And then you go down, and then you slide down into that Valley of Despair, because you always find, especially on these big projects, that there's always something that you should have done different, or that needs to be better, or that you missed. So your customer is always going to go into that Valley of Despair, but you've got to stick with it, because eventually you come back up that slope into where you're in a stable mode. And it's very, very difficult. Yeah. If you haven't been through one of these big systems implementations, I will tell you, it is very, very difficult. As difficult as it is to get to that peak of inflated expectations, going down and getting out of that Valley of Despair is even more difficult. So you've got to make sure you take care of your team. You've got to make sure that you set those expectations with your sponsors and your stakeholders. One of the things that I always tell my sponsors, it's a little bit of a joke, but every time we walk into a meeting, it's like, okay, get ready, because I'm sure you'll be disappointed. So, and like I said, it's just a little bit of a joke, because sometimes they're actually happy. But, there's always more that can be done, and managing expectations so that nobody is surprised and people get that 80%, like, the lunch speaker talked about, the 80% of the requirements that are going to make their lives better and easier and more efficient is the key.
Yeah, I think we'll get to the last question here.
Oh, okay.
So we're running out of time. But the interesting, when I was talking to Karen, that was really interesting to me was when you actually work so hard to get to that peak, and then you got to have the cake and the ice cream, and you're really relaxed. Come in the next day, and she says, "Now, this is when the really hard work starts." Really? Oh my God. I'm exhausted. Give me some time off. So you get those 3 wishes from the genie bottle. So we got the last topic is the secret sauce. And this is kind of the closeout of the discussion. I hope you got some valuable tips out of this. You enjoyed the topic and the presentation. But you've got about 7 minutes left, so you can divide that up by 3. And just talk about the secret sauce of making your project successful.
I'll start. So what we try to do is we try to have an entrance and an exit criteria for whatever we're doing so that we're on the same page as the vendor. The second thing that I do is I try to ensure that we have the data and let the data drive the decision, but because it takes the emotional discussion away. If you've done your analysis and you have the data to come to the table, people aren't talking in the terms of I feel, I think, those type of emotions that you can't really respond to. So, I have a mantra on our project is let the data drive the decision.
And I agree with what Vicky said, but I really think to me, the secret sauce still comes down to the people. Having the right people in the right roles, adding value, communicating, and understanding what needs to get done. So the people and then that support system around them to have, whether it's your deliverables or your processes or your communications mechanisms, having all of that in place and making sure that you let people do what they were brought on to do.
So I think for me, the secret sauce is the governance model. And the part of that governance model is your stakeholders and knowing who they are and what they need to know. And making sure that you're managing to that. And that goes back to that managing expectations, being transparent, making sure you're getting the right information to the right people at the right time. I think that, Karen's right. Everybody expects perfection, but perfection's not going to happen. So making sure that people know what is going to happen. And so I think to me, the secret sauce is really managing those expectations and making sure that nobody can say, but I didn't know because you would never told me. So if you make sure you tell them and you know what it is they need to know and get that information to them, keep them informed.
And I just say all of these are the special sauce. And much more.
Thank you very much. I encourage you to come up and ask some more questions and network.